invocation given by Commissioner Goodman, then join us for the pledge.
Let us stand, gentlemen. Remove your covers, please. Let us pray. Our Father and our God in heaven, we come to Thee with mournful hearts for our friends in Texas who've suffered an unspeakable tragedy. We don't question your will, God. We ask you to give comfort and peace to those who are suffering. We ask you to be with the men and women who are bravely struggling in the recovery efforts. Father, there are others in our nation who stand between us and evil. We pray for their safety, for every man and woman in service, whether it be in the military or in law enforcement. Father, we ask you for guidance tonight as we consider these matters before us. And Father, we ask all of these things in thy most precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
We've got a first and second to adopt the agenda. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, if there's no changes to the minutes from the June 17th regular meeting and public meeting and the June 24th special called meeting, can I get a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a first and second to accept the meeting minutes. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, this brings us to our first proclamation.
Yes, sir. We are actually here tonight to ratify a proclamation honoring the life of Dr. James L. Ham. This was already presented to Dr. Ham. I don't think he's here tonight to receive it, but it was presented at an event held in his honor just a few weeks ago. So this will be incorporated into the official minutes of Camden County.
Thank you, Katie. Our next presentation is the Employee of the Quarter. Mike, you handing that?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for giving me a couple of minutes tonight. We'll do something a little different tonight. What I want to do is ask everybody in the audience that works for Camden County Finance to come to the front, please. Every single one of you. I thought this might make it a little easier. Right at the center of attention where y'all love to be. That's right. All right, so today, Chairman, guests, it's my great pleasure to present the Employee of the Quarter Award for the second quarter of 2025. And I can honestly say this is the one person you definitely want on your good side because this is someone who makes sure that your paychecks actually show up. Our honoree has been with Camden County since July of 2016, initially with probate court and then on to finance. And since 2019, she's been the quiet hero behind one of the most anticipated moments every other work week, payday, right? So whether there's a snowstorm, a hurricane, or a national holiday, Melissa Rogers makes sure that the county keeps moving, and more importantly, that those direct deposits keep depositing. So if you're thinking, wow, she must be some kind of wizard, you're probably not far off. She's a magician of payroll. No rabbits, no hats, just spreadsheets, software, and a whole lot of skill. And then unlike most magicians, Melissa's also known for her quick wit, her cheerful personality, and her willingness to pitch in more than just payroll. Oh, and she absolutely loves to be the center of attention. I just made that part up. So her coworkers had a few things to say about her, and I want to share those with you now. Here are some quotes. So payday doesn't take snowstorms, hurricanes, holidays, or days off. Neither does Melissa. She's smart, she's witty, she's great to work with. She never hesitates to help. One of the most hardworking people I've ever known. Melissa processes payroll like a pro, and she does it all with a smile, which is absent from her right now. right? So now, Melissa, that's some high praise, but let's be honest. Anyone who ensures that your pay hits the bank at one time or on time automatically gets hero status, in my opinion. So while we're here celebrating her today, there's also a little bit of bittersweet news. Melissa is going to be retiring a little later this year, so while we may be tempted to chain her to the payroll desk for eternity, my HR training tells me that that's probably not appropriate. So as she prepares for her next chapter, it's only now that we take this moment to say thank you. Thank you for the dedication, thank you for the consistency, the warmth, and yes, for those beautiful pay stubs. Melissa, on behalf of the Camden County Board of Commissioners, your coworkers, and your very financially grateful teammates, congratulations, you're the employee of the quarter for quarter 2 of 2025, and we can't think of anyone more deserving. Congratulations, Melissa Rogers. So gentlemen, I'd like y'all to come down and have a picture. I want to do a picture with the group, and then we'll do one with just Melissa. So I know she loves that.
So Melissa stays still and everybody else bunches in.
All right. You really are the best, Melissa. Thank you so much.
All right, up next is a presentation by Davenport and Company. This is about our financing for the public safety complex, which will include the Camden County Sheriff's Office, the jail, and animal control. Thank you.
Courtney, is this the same as the other one?
Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening. Mr. Chairman, great to see you all again. My name is... Is that working? There we go. My name is Courtney Rogers. I'm a Senior Vice President with Davenport and Company as Financial Advisor to the county, and Christopher Holt here with me today. So we're going to tag team this presentation tonight, and what I'd like to do is, Sean, do we have it up for, there we go. As they're pulling it up, I'm just going to give you a big picture kind of overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to review the county's historical financial trends, talk about fund balance levels. We're going to go through your debt profile along with debt capacity, which is sort of like a credit card limit. We're going to talk about affordability in terms of possibly funding capital projects that you might have out there. We're going to talk about key characteristics that constitute a highly regarded credit-worthy locality. We're going to show how the county compares with the county peers, kind of give you a sense of how you look in the region, certain metrics, including the demographic profile. And then we're going to talk about formal policies related to ratings and introduce some possible enhancements. We're going to go through and talk about funding scenarios, and then outline the methods of sale and funding options available for the county for upcoming capital projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christopher and see if I can get this clicker working.
Christopher, try the other microphone. This part's not green.
Okay, let's see.
There you go. This came on.
It's on now.
This one's on? Okay, good. That sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here this evening. Here, I'll move that closer. Before we get into talking about the projects upcoming that the county is going to be considering, we wanted to kind of take a step back and give an overview of the county's finances historically, go over some comparisons regionally with some of the counties in the surrounding area, and then also look at the county's current debt picture and the capacity to take on additional debt, along with analyzing fund balance and the importance of that. So starting in the first section on slide 4, what we've done here is give a 5-year look back of the county's historical general fund results. As you can see here, I won't go line by line, but you can see that revenues and expenditures year over year have remotely grown at a steady pace. But the thing that the big takeaway from this slide is at the bottom of the page in the blue row, you can see that the county has operated a surplus and contributed to fund balance every year, which is a testament to county staff's budgeting practices and strong digest growth and conservative fiscal management. So it's great to see over the last 5 years adding to fund balance and while having a balanced budget.
Try this one.
Is this one a little bit better? I apologize. So on the next slide, on slide 5, this is getting into those regional comparisons of some of the surrounding counties nearby to Camden. Here, what we've done is analyzed one of the metrics on the general fund, which is your expenditures per capita. This essentially shows how much each resident of each county is responsible in terms of the total general fund budget. For this one, it's really just this metric we're looking at is just to be relatively around the median, which the county is right along those lines. We looked at the Georgia average, and roughly it's in the $950 to $1,000 per capita of general fund expenditures, so the county's right in line at those levels. Moving on to slide 6, what we've done here is taken the last 2 years of the county's budget to actual results for 23 and 24. As you can see here, what you can see to get to those surpluses and contributions to fund balance every year, you need to have strong and conservative budgeting. Looking over at the top left, you can see just in 2023, the county originally budgeted for $39.4 million, but came back at $41.6 million, having $2.2 million over budget, which is great to see. While if you're going down and looking at the expenditure side, it's about $622,000 less of a variance, which is relatively conservative. As you can see for 23 and 24, this resulted in contributions to fund balance. So it's strong budgetary practice by county staff and finance staff to get to these contributions to fund balance. Moving on to the next slide, this gives just a performance review of the current fiscal year. At this point, given the fiscal year just ended, we only had the first 9 months till March 31st of 2025. And what you can see here on the left chart of the blue dotted line, you can see this is a year-over-year comparison of that first 9 months in 24 to 25. Relatively consistent growth, no real outliers, and on their way to contributing to fund balance for a 6th consecutive year. On the right is analyzing your actual to total budget, and I won't go into the numbers, more into the percentage on the far right column. You can see that the county is collected more towards their budget at 78%, whereas expenditures at 73%, meaning revenues are being collected faster than expenditures through the first 9 months of this fiscal year. So now getting off the finances and kind of moving on to talking about the county's millage rate and the tax digest over the last 5 years. Here you can see the gross digest that the county's had for the last 5 years, and you can see that there's been some substantial growth in property values over the last 5 years. As you can see, on average, roughly 12% a year. One thing that I'll just take that stands out to me is in the middle of that table, you can see on the residential, nearly has doubled or gained about $1 billion in growth over the last 5 years. So really strong levels and kind of a testament to the trajectory that the county's heading. We did receive from county staff a preliminary digest of expecting about $3.3 billion for 2026, so up from roughly $3 billion in 25, so some growth there. Moving on to slide 9, this is giving a historical look back on the county's millage rate. You can see over the last 5 years that the county has rolled back the millage rate a majority of the last 5 years, now currently sitting at 12.1 mils. Slide 10, this gets into a peer comparison, analyzing the millage rate and your tax digest amongst those regional peers that we looked at. You can see the counties in the middle, and this is ranked by assessed valuation, with Glenn County being at the top at $7 billion. And what we wanted to illustrate on this slide is, if you look onto the far right column, you can see under Camden County, they are needing to levy around $27.5 million to fund the public service operations in the county. And in order to do so with the current assessed valuation at $2.2 billion, in that third column, you can see that the county is needing to levy a mill of 12.1 mils to get to that $27.5 million. Whereas Glenn County, they have a lower millage rate, but the reason why is they're having a almost doubled or triple the size in their assessed valuation at $7 billion, meaning that they don't, in order to get the same tax levy of $27.5 million that you can see in the top right, they're only having to levy 3.9 mils. So just giving a general perspective of the surrounding counties' millage rates and some added context for local residents. Slide 11, this gets into a 5-year millage rate change that's transpired for the surrounding counties. As you can see here, on the far right column, the tax digest growth for all these counties has relatively been the same, but the rollback on the millage rate has been pretty substantially different. And looking towards Camden County, there's been no county outside of Wayne that has rolled back on the millage or decreased their millage in the last 5 years than Camden, sitting at about 3.7 mils. Just for added context, Wayne County increased their millage rate. It was 5 mils 5 years ago, and so they have rolled back their millage rate substantially due to a one-time 5 mil increase. So they're, while not a considerable outlier, that is a little bit more added context to why their millage rate is lower than everyone else's. So slide 12 here, we talked about the financials. We got into talking about our tax digest and the tax rates. And what we've done on this slide is kind of summarize all of the metrics that we looked at here. And this just, what we wanted our big takeaway here is looking at that green and blue row at the bottom of your screen. What you can see is over a 5-year period, revenue or expenditures have actually grown faster than revenues. And at the table on the top left, you can see that dark green bar or dark green column is representing revenues, the light green is expenditures. You can see how there's some separation in 20 and 21, but over time, given the fact that the county has rolled back on their millage rate, at least for the most part over the last 5 years, expenditures have been catching up to revenues and are now roughly or nearly the same in 2024. So slide 13, we wanted to talk about the county's debt picture. And so looking here, the county currently doesn't have any long-term debt outstanding, only short-term obligations, which we've shown and illustrated here on this table, which is a combination of some vehicle and equipment leases. And you can see right now over total debt service payments are roughly about $500,000, but that doesn't last very long with the county expecting to be having no debt in 2030, although that some of these leases will roll forward and continue. But again, the point of this is showing that there's no long-term debt that the county has currently outstanding. Slide 14, this shows the total amount of debt outstanding for each of the peer group that we've analyzed in the region. As you can see, the county is well below the median, near the bottom, and having just that minimal debt where Ware and Wayne County are actually have zero debt currently So slide 15, we wanted to analyze here, when we're talking about coming through some new projects, we wanted to take a step back and look at the county's debt capacity and debt affordability. And through GFOA best practices and our experience with rating agencies, we have certain metrics that I'll get into on the next couple slides that kind of illustrate that and kind of show that quantitatively. But essentially what debt capacity is from a personal finance level is thinking about your credit card. That is your credit card limit, where your debt affordability is how much you're able to pay off your credit card bill every month or every year, for speaking in terms of the county. So the way we show debt capacity and debt affordability is two what we call key debt ratios. Your debt capacity being your debt versus your full value or your tax digest. And your second, which is your debt affordability, which is taking the annual debt service payments the county has and taking that over your annual general fund expenditures or your budget. And that will just determine how much you can afford on an annual basis. And so what we've done on the next two slides is show that, show a projection of what that would be over the next 10 years. Obviously, the county doesn't have any long-term debt outstanding, so right now, both of these ratios are at 0%, which is great, especially when considering projects ahead. So what we've done here, Moody's, one of the rating agencies, they historically had some criteria that analyzed this exact metric, and you can see in the bottom left the rating thresholds that they had. Courtney will get into this in a further section about analyzing financial policies, and we have wanted to recommend some debt management policies, with the first being that this debt versus full value. And you can see in the blue text box, we're recommending a policy of 1.75%. And taking the current tax digest, the county can issue $132 million in principal debt to where they could reach that 1.75%. So a substantial amount of debt to be issued before you reach that threshold, and that will put us in a very strong perspective from the rating agencies, from GFOA's best practices that we've determined. Debt service versus expenditures, similar, one of the other rating agencies, S&P, looking at their historic criteria, same thing with their certain thresholds. We are recommending a policy, again, in the blue shade of 15%. As you can see, assuming a 20-year hypothetical borrowing at a 5% interest rate, the county could issue roughly $79 million in debt, which would be what we consider the limiting factor of the two metrics, which is the lowest of the two. So this is the one that we'll be looking at when considering these capital projects that the county is considering moving forward, which puts it about $80 million roughly to reach the policy that we're recommending. So moving on to the next section, we've gotten into the finances, we talked about our debt picture and our debt profile and ability to take on additional debt. We wanted to make a separate section given the importance of fund balance. And so on the first slide here, this just is kind of a couple bullet points of some of the major factors of why it's important to hold a high fund balance. As you may know, we're not immune to natural disasters and hurricanes. So having an emergency fund in order to combat one-time expenditures is really important. And so we think having a high fund balance is crucial in that regard, just to name a few. Other odds and ends, one-time capital expenditures that come aboard that are needed. We, again, think having a high cash reserve is important to be able to combat those expenditures year over year to prevent a one-time cash infusion borrowing, such as a TAN. So in slide 21, we wanted to show a slide of a hypothetical cash position of a poor standing municipality and a good standing municipality. So in the dark green, again, this is strictly just a hypothetical. You can see that given that the county is paid once a year through property taxes, or the majority of their budget is paid through property taxes, you can see that that's at the end of the year, the county needs to be able to fund operations for 12 months before at the end of the year, their cash position is then skyrocketed back up to a a higher level. And so you can see in the dark green is a poor standing municipality, meaning that if your fund balance is not at a higher level to manage 12 months of operations, you'll dip down into a deficit where a tan is needed, which is that light shaded blue. The county, which I'll show in a second, has, due to the strong financial performance over the last 5 years, has built the county's financial or fund balance position into that light green level where they're able to have strong reserves to be able to navigate 12 months of expenditures. And that's why on the next slide on 22, this kind of illustrates that. We've shown over the last 10 years the county's unassigned fund balance. And you can see over the last 5 years, given that strong financial performance in that first slide I went into, the county has worked their way back in 2017 of roughly $1 million in fund balance up to now to $17.5 million, or 40% of the budget. The county's current policy is 25%, so roughly 15% in wiggle room there. So it's great to see, and it's a really strong indicator of a healthy county from a financial perspective. Slide 23, this just shows a comparison. Won't go to every county, but you can see that the county is well above the peer median. Some of these counties are a lot smaller, and meaning that their budgets are a lot smaller, and the fact that their actual unassigned fund balance, when looking at absolute dollars, is actually not that high. For instance, I believe Wayne County's is around roughly $2 to $3 million. Natural disasters do happen, and unfortunately, they do cost the same. They're not getting a discount for that. So knowing where Camden County's position is at $17.5 million is strong, not only from a percentage basis, but also from an absolute dollar perspective. So the next slide, this gets into a projection on how fiscal year 2025 is going. Right now, currently, the county's unassigned fund balance is about $16.5 million, or 35% of the current budget. Again, this is just hypothetically here from a capacity standpoint. If the county were to draw $4.5 million from that reserves tomorrow, they would still be able to reach their policy. So strong levels from a fund balance perspective, given all of the strong financial performance that's happened from the county over the last 5 years to get to this level. Courtney?
I think this wired mic is working a lot better. So what I want to talk about now is a little bit about why a credit rating is important. So Christopher's been covering a lot of the things the agencies are going to ask about: finances, fund balance, things like that, debt levels. And so the question is, why does that matter? Well, if we're considering a project that's large enough, we may need to go to the public market because depending upon the size, if we're just going to go and talk to certain banks, they may not be able to fund the entire project. So why is this credit rating important? Well, because if at the end of the day, it's going to dictate the interest rate level. And so the higher the rating we get, the better the interest rate we're going to get. So what are the things that go into a credit rating? So if you look on the slide here on page 26, you'll see there's really 4 areas they're going to talk about. They want to know what's the local economy like. They want to know about your financial performance, your debt levels, and your management. And so as you think about that, 3 of the 4 you really have a lot of control over. You all control your financial performance, you control your debt levels, you control management. Management being things like policies, how you're budgeting, you do have balanced budgets, things like that. The local economy, of course, is a little bit tougher. Yes, you have some control over some policies and things like that, but I liken it to a large ship. It's very hard to turn very quickly. So the type of things that sometimes you just don't have that direct control over. So the question is, what is the county's rating? Well, you don't actually have a rating currently, and that's and Christopher alluded to that earlier. We said that there are no long-term bonds outstanding. You did have a rating, though, an A1 rating when your last bonds were paid off. In 2012, you issued debt. You got an initial rating of AA3. That was done through the Solid Waste Authority. In 2019, though, you got downgraded. And the reason was, if you might remember that slide a few slides ago, it showed fund balance. It was very, very low. You got dinged because your fund balance was too low. It wasn't at the levels of a AA3 if you think of it from a peer comparison standpoint. So they took you down to an A1, and with even a negative outlook. basically saying that it wasn't going to get better. They might even go down further. But before that happened in 2021, the bonds were all paid off. You had sufficient funds, and the bond was no longer outstanding. So at that point, the rating goes away because there were no bonds to rate. And again, sort of talking about that downgrade, if you look there where it talks about credit challenges, it says modest reserves and liquidity and significant use of reserves for capital projects. So evidently, back in those days, the board was using, the commission was using those dollars, if you would, to pay for some one-time projects to the point that it got so low that it raised the concern of the rating agencies. But you can see on the credit strength side, you've got large tax base, minimal debt and no pension liability, and you've got the anchor, of course, of the sub-base nearby that lead to some of the strengths. And then you see the factors that could lead to an upgrade would be substantial increases in the reserves and liquidity positions, material tax base expansion, and improvement with wealth indicators. We think that what you've done over the last several years with fund balance, getting it back up, is one of the things that can get you back up in the AA category if we are going to be talking to the agencies in the near future. Kind of going back to why is it important, I mentioned the interest rate levels. This shows a graph going back to 2003 through 2008. You can see that the average was about 18 basis points, the difference between a AA rating and a single A rating. So 18 basis points is just below 0.25%, basically 0.25%. And you can see that it jumped up there in 2008. You might remember that was during the credit crisis. There was a flight to quality, and folks wanted the better quality, and so that jumped up. It doubled up to almost 40 basis points. It's since come back down, but not to pre-credit crisis levels. It's now roughly about 25 basis points. But if you take that high water, if you want average of 36 basis points, if you were out borrowing $50 million, that could mean a savings of $2.6 million over the life of the bonds. So that's why it's important to try to get the best rating that's possible. I mentioned earlier about management. And so one of the things they ask about when it comes to management is what type of policies does this county have? And so the things that there are other types of policies that you all take into account, but the policies that we want to focus on tonight are the ones that the agencies care about: fund balance, debt management, and investments. And so we took a look at those policies, and on the unassigned fund balance, you have a very strong policy of 25%. You'll note, as Christopher talked about in the comparison, that is a lot of your peers had fund balances at least at that level. That is a very popular number for around the state in terms of that level. We aren't suggesting a major change there, just some kind of tweaks, talking about maybe some of the replenishment provisions in the event you were to go below that policy again. And so those are some of the things that we were going to work with staff on to bring back to you. In terms of the debt policies, the two that Christopher spoke about, you have a policy related to debt as a percentage of full value. Our recommendation is to actually tighten that up a little bit. 10% is a little on the higher side, so we're recommending that 1.75 that Christopher talked about. And that's tied to the AA indicator, if you would, by Moody's that he spoke about earlier. And then on the debt service as a percentage of expenditures, similarly, we're going to make a modification there. We actually want to give ourselves a little more room and go from 10% to 15% and suggest getting rid of the average maturity at or below 10 years, because that we think is a little too tight. And we're comfortable making that change again, sort of in that AA range that S&P's factors we're looking at. And then finally on investments, your current policies really are talking about safety, liquidity, procedure, and authorized personnel. We want to just add a little bit more meat to those bones, getting into the authorized institutions as well as some credit rating minimums on certain types of investments. So it's really just strengthening all of those policies. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later about coming back to those.
Okay, so in conversation with county staff, we wanted to look at two projects this evening that the county was going to be considering, with the first project being the public safety complex, or the jail, that based off of the most recent estimate that we received was at $50 million. The second project is a $3 million animal control facility. So before we get into some of the debt service estimates, county staff has provided us with some, because the total project's going to be 53 million for both projects. And we have been informed that there is some SPLOST funds that will be able to be contributed to downsize that total project cost, or the total debt borrowing that's being contemplated for you tonight. First, this is SPLOST 8 showing the historic collections over the SPLOST period. You can see that there's been some great growth in this taxation that has happened. You can see that the total SPLOST 8 collections outside of the last month in June that's yet to come in is about 67.4 million. County staff has dedicated 4 million of that at this point preliminarily to be contributed towards to downsize these projects. So SPLOST 9. So earlier this year, county residents approved the continuation of the SPLOST tax. SPLOST 9 was estimated to bring in about $85 million to fund the following projects listed below. The public safety complex was listed as a priority project and a level 1 project, meaning that when SPLOST collections come in, that 10 million would be dedicated first, or the county staff has the option to dedicate that $10 million towards that project before any of the other projects specified would be paid for. Again, that's just an option. So getting into the projections provided by county staff, assuming just a conservative 4% interest rate, this is how we've come to that $85 million estimate that's to be collected over the next 6 years during that SPLOST period. Starting later this year, or starting a couple weeks ago, actually, on July 1st. And so, as I pointed out, about $10 million on that table from SPLOST 9 will be contributed towards downsizing this project. So now getting into the hypothetical of a bond for issuing debt for this project, taking the $53 million project cost of $50 million from the jail, $3 million from the animal control facility, $4 million from SPLOST 8 to be downsized, with another $10 million to be collected over the next year to downsize for SPLOST 9. The total bonds that we're going to be reviewing this evening is a bond size of about $39 million. So we analyzed 2 separate scenarios in discussion with county staff this evening. Not going line by line, you can see the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2 is we analyzed a 20-year borrowing versus amortizing the debt over 30 years. Now, assuming a public market issuance using a tax-exempt interest rate, we assumed a conservative 5% planning rate right now. Based on current market, we would anticipate a 20-year borrowing to be somewhere in the 4.25% range, with a 30-year borrowing being somewhere at around 4.75%. But in conversation with county staff, we wanted to show a conservative 5% planning rate because, as you can see just below that, we anticipate closing on this bond issuance next fall on November 1st of 2026. So given a year out, we wanted to add in some cushion, so we assumed a conservative 5% planning rate. So getting into the first scenario, again, analyzing a $39 million borrowing over 20 years at a 5% interest rate, you can see that the annual debt service payment is just over $3 million. We've structured this debt service repayment to be level, so the county will be responsible for paying roughly $3 million every year for the next 20 years, with a total debt service for the life of the loan being about $62.6 million. So what we wanted to do also is kind of show the impact to the average homeowner and what would be needed from the county staff in order to be able to fund that $3 million in debt service. And what we've done is we've quantified that using the millage equivalent impact. And so that is essentially taking your millage, the value of one millage rate, or 1 mil, which is if you're taking your assessed valuation divided by 1,000. So 1 mil right now for, based off the 24 assessed value, is around $2.2 million, meaning that the county would roughly need to increase the millage rate by roughly 1.35 mils in order to cover the $3 million in debt service. Now, there's multiple ways that we can get to that 1.35 mils. That can be through the benefit of tax digest growth. That can also be through cutting some expenditures or cutting costs. And then lastly, being it just simply increasing the millage rate in order to cover that debt service payment. And so what we've done on the bottom table is show the median home value of the county right now is roughly $300,000. So we've taken a range from a $100,000 home to a $500,000 home and what that would look like in terms of how the bill would be impacted. So just for instance, on this scenario, if you had a $200,000 home in Camden County and your tax bill was increased by 1.35 mils, you'd be looking at roughly $100 in your annual tax bill increasing, or roughly $10 a month, to be able to fund both of these projects on the debt service payment on a $200,000 home. So moving into scenario 2, this is just analyzing all the same assumptions, just going out 30 years. So on a $39 million borrowing, you're roughly going to be paying about $2.5 million. But given the fact that we're not paying off principal faster, you're paying it 10 more years longer, you're looking at a lot higher of a total debt service payment. Although your annual payment's lower, the total debt service is at $76.2 million. And there's going to be a comparison that we'll get into at the end of this section that'll illustrate that a little bit better. So again, scenario 2, I've walked through this. Given the fact that your projected debt service, again, scenario 1 was around $3 million, this is at $2.5 million, you're not going to have to come up with the same millage equivalent impact. So this would be lower at 1.1 mils in contrast to 1.35 mils. So again, looking at a $200,000 house, increasing the millage rate by 1.1 mils, your annual tax bill will be $84, or to put it from a monthly basis, that'd be $7 a month for the average homeowner on a $200,000 house. So this slide here, this kind of summarizes those two scenarios and kind of shows the additional cost in going out 30 years in comparison to 20 years. Although you're getting the benefit of being able to have a lower annual payment, scenario 1's total debt service is about $62.6 million, where it's going to be about an additional $14 million in total debt service over the life of the loan to have that to have a lower debt service payment by $500,000 up to $76.2 million. As you can see, looking at the homeowner on a $300,000 house, we're looking at a $2 difference on your monthly bill for how much that $500,000 is going to be differentiated between scenario 1 and scenario 2. So here, I'll turn it over to Courtney for
All right, taking us home here. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If we're going to need to go out and finance, there are a lot of different things. As your financial advisor, our job is to figure out how do we get the lowest cost of borrowing? What's the best way to go out and borrow the money so we get the lowest cost of borrowing for you? In this particular instance, the thing that's probably going to drive it more than anything is the size. But one of the things we look at is really two different options. The direct bank loans I mentioned earlier, do we go to the banks or do we go to the public market? And there's several different things and different ways that we look at it. But really in this case, it's probably going to come down to size. There's only a handful of banks that's going to be able to handle $40 million in the ballpark of that number. And so, I liken it to if I want to put my car up for sale, I want as many people looking at it and giving me, a quote on that or being able to purchase it as possible. So I want to have a lot of folks that are giving me their looks. In the public markets, we're going to get more looks, frankly, at $40 million. So that's probably, we're still years away from making that decision, but that's probably, if you ask today, the way we're going to go. So what we want to do in that role is just kind of give you a sense of what does it take to issue the debt. And while not going through line by line, I'll just say that we're looking at roughly a 90-day period. We need roughly 30 days to work with bond counsel to pull together all the documents, including an official statement that basically, think of it as the offering statement, that'll have a lot of information about the county. We'll be putting together a credit presentation. Again, we want to push the rating agencies to get you back up in that AA category with all the great things you've done on the finance side and the great things that have been going on in terms of the growth of the local economy. And so then the balance of that will be coming to you, getting approvals, and then actually going through the sale process. Now, so then the question becomes, what type of bonds are we going to issue? There's really two options in talking with bond counsel to fund both the jail and the animal control facility. We have GEO bonds. We've also have intergovernmental revenue bonds. And as you probably are aware, intergovernmental revenue bonds are issued through a third party. And so when we look and see what you have, when you look down at the bottom of the chart, you'll see that depending upon the type of bonds and how it's issued, there are green and X's. The red X's mean that we can't issue. So for instance, under the existing authority, the PSA, for instance, if we were to do an intergovernmental contract, we actually can't issue animal control. Bond counsel has told us that they don't have the authority to do an animal control facility, but they can do the jail. If you did GEO bonds, you could do both. If you created a new authority, you could do both. If you SPLOST, you can't do both because we don't have a SPLOST currently that authorizes both, not in its entirety. And then as a lease purchase or an installment sale, which is like an appropriation debt, we can't do the jail, but we could do the animal control facility, and that has to do with size. So kind of goes back to either GEO bonds, which of course means you have to go to referendum, or an intergovernmental contract and going through and create a new authority. So one of the thoughts we had was that you've got time because we're not going to need this money until next fall. In order to create a new authority, we have to go through the General Assembly. And so that's something that can be worked on, and I'll talk about that here in just a moment. The next couple of slides, I'm not going to get into in details, but essentially they're the pros and cons between a GEO bond and a intergovernmental revenue bond issue. And frankly, they're very close when it comes to interest rates. They're virtually the same. And so we're good with either one of them. But in terms of timing and getting it done, probably intergovernmental revenue is the fastest way to go. Now, we talk about the role of a new third party. I know there's been a few questions. The purpose really is to acquire, construct, equip, maintain, and operate projects. That's kind of what the legislation sets up. But you can dictate how this authority and what powers it has. And really, all we need this authority to do is issue debt. We don't need it controlling or running any operation. You don't need to have any executive director running it or anything like that. It really is just to be called upon when needed by this commission to issue debt. They don't need to meet on a regular basis. They don't need to have an office or anything like that. We added a few kind of frequently asked questions when we've talked about new third parties. We've created a couple for some counties around the state recently, including to your neighbors to the north in Chatham County. I was actually on the phone with them today talking about a potential use of that down the road. They were having the issue through the Downtown Savannah Authority, and they decided they wanted to have their own and went through the General Assembly and created. And when we did that, working with Gray Pinnell, who's also your bond lawyers, we basically gave it the authority to do just about anything that a public body would need in order to serve the citizens. And so that it's the type thing that once you set it up, you've got it forever, and that you could use not just today for the projects that we're talking about next year, but also other projects down the road. So that's our thoughts is, and the steps to creating that would basically be for you all to approve a resolution, authorize the creation of this new third-party authority. We just called it a TPA for short for the moment. That can be a name that you all want. That resolution would basically be sent to your local legislative delegation, something you want to have a discussion with them on, that they would then introduce into the General Assembly. Legislative Council then works with the county to delegate to and the delegation to create a draft. And then there's publications that need to be had, and then, of course, the Senate and the House will take it up next spring. Assuming approval, it would go to the governor for his approval and signature, and then it would take effect. And then it comes back to you all to decide how you want to appoint your members and create it. So that's easily could be done by the time that we have the bids in hand on the jail and know exactly how much we're going to need next year. So final observations would be for you all to discuss adopting a recommended financial policies. I mentioned we were going to work on some more detail for your finance staff and county manager to take into account, and then start moving forward with the creation of a third-party authority over the course of the next several months. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to answer questions, should you have any.
All right, thank you. Any board members got any questions?
We do. Hey, gentlemen, so when we met on the 8th last week, I asked you, what was it in the PSA legislation that prohibited the PSA from issuing bonds on an animal control facility? Were you able to go back to bond counsel and get a?
I think it was because
Answer to
it wasn't explicitly stated, and I don't know I know it didn't say it's just not available. I think it was not explicitly stated the way they read it.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, so what I have here actually is the 22-page most recent piece of legislation. I've whittled it down to 3 points, if you don't mind.
Okay.
All right. So what is the purpose of the Public Service Authority? This authority is created for nonprofit and public purposes, and it is found, determined, and declared that the creation of this authority and the carrying out of its corporate purposes are in all respects for the benefit of the people of Camden County, and that the authority is an institution of purely public charity and will be performing essential government functions in the exercise of the power conferred upon it by this act. So that's its purpose, and what kind of powers is this authority granted? What we have is the cooperative purpose and objective of the authority is to provide the legal, political, developmental, financing, and operational structure and authorization for those projects, public services and facilities deemed necessary for the public health and welfare that may be undertaken through cooperative efforts of the Board of Commissioners of Camden County or one or more of the municipal corporations within said county or such other agencies. When we go on to the types of powers that they have, we have the power, the authority shall have all of the powers necessary or convenient to carry out and effectuate the purpose and provisions of this act. So they have all the power necessary to meet their purpose, correct? So we go on, they have the power to construct, direct, acquire, own, repair, remodel, maintain, add to, extend, improve, equip, operate, and manage facilities and services as defined in this act. And this is probably the most important part, and the last part I will highlight. In the exercise of the stated purpose and objective, the authority shall be empowered to undertake any service, function, or activity that is authorized by law for municipalities, counties, and resources recovery authorities, included but not restricted to the development, financing, construction, and operation of public buildings or facilities and service-related program systems such as solid waste collection and disposal services and facilities, resource recovery systems and facilities, recreational sports and civic-related services and facilities, including parks, playgrounds, community centers, pools, auditoriums, stadiums, gymnasiums, and various activity and athletic field and courts, fire protection services and facilities, emergency medical services and facilities, comprehensive community planning and code enforcement services and programs, economic and industrial development programs and facilities, airports, medical services. You've got general hospitals, mental health facilities. It goes on, and it's not limited by this. So I have 22 pages here on why the Public Service Authority could issue those bonds, and we wouldn't need to create a whole third-party authority.
Understand.
So that's just
So let me
my
add one
concern.
thing that it came to my, I apologize, I didn't think about this earlier when you asked the question, and I didn't think about it last week when we talked, but first I'll say, I'm not a bond lawyer.
Right,
And we
and
relied,
neither
we
am I.
relied on Gray Pennell's, they reviewed this and gave us feedback.
Legal opinion,
But
right.
in a discussion, and I do not know the revenue bond law of the state, because I'm not a lawyer, but they were concerned about the revenue bond law, which is different than the creation of the
I
authority.
actually have their authority for revenue bonds, if you'd like me to.
Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you, that's not what I do. I do numbers, not,
My point being, I
Verbiage.
think we should have more, I know we're not voting on
Yep.
this tonight, but I
No,
think there should be more
absolutely.
consideration, more research into this.
I would
before
say
we-
have them give
whole
you a
nother-
letter of recommendation, or have them a letter outlining why they've had an issue with it.
And Commissioner Smith, that's certainly something that I can address.
Yes, please.
You know, so that would probably be better suited towards me than the Davenport group is.
No,
to
no, I know
address
they've been working with the bond lawyers, and I'd asked them this question last week.
Yep,
I would
I
I would hope you
apologize, didn't get a
anticipated
chance.
me asking it again.
No, I
because-
apologize, didn't get a chance to talk to him, so.
Yeah, of course, but I mean, it seems pretty explicit in here that they have very broad, and, I mean, it's even specifically, this act is for the welfare of various political subdivisions of the state and inhabitants and shall be liberally construed to affect the purpose hereof. I mean, it's very broad. It gives consolidation for the municipality and the counties, and it has the ability to issue these bonds.
And certainly that's something that we can address and investigate.
Right.
I will heavily rely on the advice and recommendations of bond counsel because that is a highly technical area
No.
of municipal law. That
This
we
is
can
actually a really easy read. I could send it to you if you'd like.
I will certainly look at it, Commissioner, but I will confer with bond counsel to address this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, given the history of the PSA, I don't know if I would be in favor of bonding through them or not.
Well, and if that's our intention is to get rid of the Public Service Authority, then I would be understanding and maybe even agree with you. But to tell us that you can't do it through the PSA, no one's been able to show me where.
Understand.
I got 22 reasons on why I
I've
think
done
we can.
hundreds of millions of dollars of debt with the Gray Pennell firm in the last dozen-plus years I've worked in this state. They wouldn't have just made it up. So there's a reason. I just apologize, I don't know the answer.
Well, when we met last week as well, there was conversation about the St. Mary's, City of St. Mary's even being able to refinance their water and sewer bonds through the new PFA, Public Facilities Authority is what it was called last week. So, is there incentive for refinancing, for a company like yourself? I just don't understand if
No.
we have the tools already available. It's something I'd like to explore before we move forward with.
Oh,
the
yeah,
new
absolutely.
authority.
What, anybody else got any more questions?
And this may not be a great question, but it's to Jackie. When you're checking, I heard everything you said. I wish you could have wrapped that up in about 2 sentences, but it would have been a lot better. But but my question is, if you got a TPA, right, that we were calling a third party,
Whatever we want to
author,
name it,
yeah.
right?
But could you set it up for just these 2 projects? Do you have to open it wide open where it goes to anything?
Why would you set it up for just 2 projects when something else might come up 5, 10 years from now?
I just hate open-ended issues. I'd rather see them specific. We're building a public service or a jail, and we're doing
Well, the bond has an end date to it. And you also got to remember, if we do this bond for 20 years or 30 years or whatever, hopefully we'll have another splosh come up and it passes. We can put some of that debt on that
Right,
next splosh
right.
as well.
But does the TPA have an end date as well? Or do you just, you've got another authority, and do you just keep that authority with the PSA as well? I mean, that's 2 authorities.
It would be totally separate from the PSA
Right.
if we create this new authority.
The TPA would not be functioning autonomously, would they? I mean, they would be under our oversight, would they
Right.
not?
It all depends on who we appoint as members.
We'd have to be very careful about that, but I don't see them being able to.
You could do it kind of sort of like we do the Solid Waste Authority. We would be the members.
Right.
All I'm doing is asking, can you just tie it to 2 specific projects? And then it has an end date.
I think we can certainly look at that, but I would be reluctant to do an authority that is so limited in that scope because this can give the county the ability to do other things as we go forward. That would
Okay.
be my concern, quite honestly, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody got anything else?
If I could just for the last time express my concern is that we already have a tool to meet those exact ends, and I don't really see the necessity of creating another one.
Anything else? Yeah, we can have another day to discuss the PSA. The county cannot dissolve the PSA on its own. If you go back to the original legislation for the PSA, the way I interpret it as it was written is the county cannot withdraw. The cities can withdraw, but the county cannot, so. All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. We'll work with staff to, I'm
Thank
making
you,
myself a
guys.
note right now
I
to
ask questions
apologize.
not to criticize, just to
Oh, no, I
understand.
understand.
So thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I'd like to know the answer myself in case it comes up again somewhere else in the state. So we'll work with staff and get an answer back to everyone.
Well, our PSA is rather unique, I believe. So,
It is. It's, again, worked all over the state. I've not seen anything like it.
Thank you, Courtney and Christopher.
Thank y'all.
Yes, sir.
Broke it
Great.
down
Thank-
To an
thank-
understandable level. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Well, hey, there is one more question. The
Shoot.
credit rating,
Yes, sir.
you know, we don't have one at this point.
Yes, sir.
But
That's
you
correct.
guys are going to work diligently to try to get us at least a double A?
That's the goal, right. And that would be once we're in the process of heading down the road of doing long-term debt.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I think the first part of getting to that next step is with adopting the financial policies, because that's something that the credit rating agencies look at very closely in terms of having good practices with these financial policies. And
Great point. And I think what we'd like to do is work with staff now and bring that to you in the near future, so that while it's fresh in your mind, you've seen the reasons why. Okay? Great, thank you.
All right, does anybody need to take a break before we move on?
Like a potty break? Be
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, I thought, yeah.
All right, we'll recess for, so 5 minutes. We'll come back at 5 after 7. All right, we'll begin again. This brings us to our first public comment section of the night. We'll limit it to 3 minutes and agenda items only. Any registered speakers, Katie?
Yes, sir. Mr. Ricky Manning.
Gentlemen, with the presentation, it was a good presentation, but I'd just like to say a couple things on it. Is that presentation online? I know you're not going to answer me, you can tell me later, so that the citizens can view it. After all, it is our tax money, so we can look over everything. And if a new authority needs to be done, I would push for a referendum vote on it, and probably will continue to if that's what happens. We're not trusting the PSA, I do understand that. But hey, y'all got authority, let's appoint new PSA members and let's move on. Instead of creating new authorities. We already got the solid waste authority that the citizens don't know nothing about because y'all hide everything. Thank you for that part. Now, if I can, I'd like to address the plat land trade with the Camden land acquisition. We're gonna do a land swap out there, and we know this is Gilligan's Island in case people don't know, where we've already made some mistakes out there in the past with that land. The land that we are going to acquire, is there plans for that land that the land acquisition wants to swap? If not, that's a high dollar piece of property right now they want. There's your $1.5 million probably right there. If the county has no plans for the land, let's sell that land to them. We don't need to accumulate more swamp land out there because that's what you're getting in that 30-some odd acre piece, or what I see in the soil surveys on it. Besides that, folks, I think I'm through with y'all. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else registered, Katie? Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Come on up.
Janet Heath, Woodbine. Just want to make a quick note that the jail that we have now is what, 30 years old, 40 years old? So if you're doing a 30-year loan, and a jail is something that gets intense use 24 hours a day for 30 years, it would be a shame to be paying that last 10 years on a jail that may not be in good shape. So keep it at 20 years if you can, and keep the place well repaired and in good condition those 20 years plus. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on. All right, this time we need a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and convene a public hearing.
I move to adjourn the regular meeting and convene the public hearing.
Second.
Got a first and a second to convene a public hearing. All in favor? All right, Joey, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, we have a request to rezone approximately 5.7 acres from agricultural forestry to agricultural residential / single-family residential, which is an R1 zoning. This property is located in District 1 at 2128 Horse Stamp Church Road in Waverly. This is a picture of the parcel, which is, as stated, located off Horse Stamp Church Road. This is the zonings that surround that parcel, which you can see most of the zonings is AF. There is a R2 zoning up the road from this, and behind it is a AR zoning. Now, the applicant is requesting the rezoning to subdivide the property into 3 separate parcels for their children. One 2.5 acre parcel will be zoned AR, which is agricultural residential, and the remaining 2 parcels at 1.7 and 1.5 acres each will be zoned single-family residential, which is an R1 zoning. This is the plat that will be submitted to subdivide this property, like I stated, into 3 separate parcels. The AR zoning will be on your left, and the other 2 on the right will be the single-family R1 zonings. The Planning Commission does recommend approval on this request.
Okay, anyone from the public wish to speak in favor of this item? Anyone wish to speak in opposition? All right, any commissioners have any questions? All right, now we need a motion to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got first and second to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, I assume everybody's read the consent agenda. There's one item on here, approval of health services agreement. That's with the sheriff's office. We don't really have to do anything with that. He's got the authority to sign it. But for transparency purposes, he wanted us to put it on here. So with that, I move we approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second? Got a first and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, you're back up, Joey.
Thank you, Chairman. As stated before, we have a request to rezone approximately 5.7 acres from agricultural forestry to agricultural residential / single-family residential. This property is located in District 1 at 2128 Horse Stamp Church Road in Waverly. Planning Commission does recommend approval of this request.
Can I get a motion on this item?
I move we approve the request.
Second.
All right, we got a first and a second to approve the rezoning. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, Kelsey.
Good evening, Commissioners. This agenda item is for your consideration to approve the contract for Senior Congregate Meals vendor to Creative Catering and Design. The current contract for Senior Congregate Meals ended on June 30th. Camden County issued an invitation to bid and received 2 bids. Both of the bids came in at $11 for each meal. Of the 2, Creative Catering and Design was the most responsive and responsible bidder. Staff recommends approval to award the contract to Creative Catering and Design.
All right, can I get a motion on this item?
Make a motion to approve Creative Catering as the preferred vendor for the senior center foods, with the comment that everything I've ever eaten from there has been outstanding, and I think this is a wonderful thing to do for our senior citizens.
Absolutely.
Second.
All right, we got a first and a second to approve the food vendor. All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Chief Sullivan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I come before you tonight on behalf of Camden County Fire Rescue to request $59,735.34 to purchase 18 sets of safety and bunker gear from Municipal Emergency Services. This request is an item in our approved fiscal year budget and will be purchased for newly hired employees as well as tenured employees who have bunker gear that's nearing its expiration. Currently, our new hired recruits are in rental bunker gear for their firefighter basic training course that they're in. And if you have any questions, I'll entertain those at this time.
All right, I make a motion we approve the purchase of the 18 sets of bunker gear.
Second.
All right, we got a first and second to approve the bunker gear purchase. Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion carries. All right. All right, this brings us to item number 7, the acceptance of the plat and land trade. Are you doing that, Sean?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll do it. So the land that the county currently has in ownership is approximately 27 acres. We had received that as part of a green space grant where the property would have to be maintained as green space. We could never sell it. However, we were able to transfer or offset. We were able to identify that within the deed. There was not that restriction where we could actually do like a land swap trade as long as the new property that we would receive would also remain in green space. This is also part of St. Mary's TAD 3. So Camden Land Acquisition is the company that's going to be developing all of those sites. So what we did was we identified a portion of their land, which is that just over 30 acre tract that you can see there in the agenda packet, closer to Highway 40, and it's pretty much right across the street from Hippo Storage and Lighthouse. radio. So we identified that track as probably being more served for green space. And there will be still public access. That's another requirement of the grant that we had received. When we received that original 27 acres, it had to be open to the public. So Camden Land Acquisition is going to work with us to ensure that there is public accessibility there. So with that before you, all of the plat subdivisions have gone through St. Mary's. They were going to be waiting on us to approve tonight, and then they'll finalize everything.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion on this item?
I move to approve the land swap.
Do we have a second?
Second with this brief discussion.
Okay, this is to approval acceptance of plat and land trade with Camden Land Acquisition. Start off.
All right, my understanding is basically, we couldn't have done anything with this land anyway, am I correct?
That's correct. It would have
and-
had to stay green space.
And we're literally just trading land to give St. Mary's so that they can build their community there that they want to build, am I
Yes, sir,
correct?
essentially. The land that we're receiving is, again, going to remain green space.
Right, okay.
It also relieves us of the liability of that former piece of property that was there.
Yeah, a portion of that property, which, again, the large property, the properties around the property that we owned were never really gated. And a portion of the property that we owned was actually part of the lake, or a little, I call it a lake or pond. But in the event somebody did drown there, you know, we stood a high likelihood of potentially being party to a lawsuit. So very fortunate that never happened. But with the new land, there predominantly over 75% of it is wetland, which, you know, may or may not be able to be used into the future for wetland credits. So there may be a benefit there to us into the future. We're still exploring that, you know, as the environmental policy changes through different administrations. So there may be a benefit to us later down in the road.
We should look for a grant to possibly put a boardwalk through the middle of it.
That's one of the
Something like that.
discussions we had had with them is, you know, having that public accessibility, but then also affording us the ability to just have like a walking dock.
Now, the concept of Gilligan's Island, that was a good concept if you own the whole lake and you can control access. Of course, that was a failed endeavor. All right, any more discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. All right, this brings us to item number 8.
I'll do this one as well, Mr. Chairman. So this is an updated franchise agreement. Back in 2007, the county entered into a franchise agreement with back then Woodrow Sapp. And since that time, Woodrow Sapp sold to Water Utility Management, which is probably, I think, Georgia's largest private water provider in the state. I believe they have over something like 15,000 customers or something like that. I'm going off memory here, but a very large corporation. Since, I believe they acquired the Woodrow Sapp operation in Camden back in 2019, 2020, sometime around there. So since then, they've been operating in Camden County, maintaining the system. But what this does is this updates the franchise agreement. It also incorporates new language as far as rate structures, which would predominantly be your tap fees, as well as like an accessibility fee if there's vacant land that's within the service area. Generally, those would probably be more in your subdivision areas versus along the main right-of-way where the main trunk lines are running. But this is a 20-year agreement. The original agreement that we had with Woodrow Sapp was also a 20-year agreement. It's gone through countless attorneys back and forth, looking at it, reviewing it. Our county attorneys reviewed it and has blessed it. And we believe this is probably the best franchise agreement we're going to be able to achieve moving forward. Another thing that this franchise agreement will do is also kind of give way, if you will, to the Bridgepoint subdivision being able to move forward with also pulling permits. That is one request we're kind of asking on top of y'all's approval, if you do approve this franchise agreement this evening, is that there's a number of properties within the Bridgepoint subdivision that have recently sold. My understanding is that the HOA and water utility management is very close to achieving a service agreement, which would consist of water and sewer services. And if that's the case, then, you know, to build a house is probably going to be at least six to 8 months. And we would be able to go ahead and start offering conditional permits to those people that have already purchased property, meaning the conditions is that we would not issue a certificate of occupancy until that service agreement has been achieved. I know that's a mouthful, so I'll answer any questions that you may have.
This also, in the future, possibly lead way to us working with the Glenn County Joint Water and Sewer, whatever, I can't remember exactly what it's
Brunswick
called.
Water Sewer Commission, yes, sir.
Yeah, but it may lead us to working with them to move the waste north of the Little Satilla River, which will enable that north end of the county to possibly have greater water and sewer availability outside of these existing subdivisions.
Yeah, it's worth noting, so the water is provided all the way from Tuscan on 17 upwards to, is it River Place subdivision, River Place, and then all the way down to Bridgepoint along Dover Bluff. However, sewer services are only offered east of 95 on Dover Bluff, up to the Bridgepoint subdivision. So like Sanctuary Cove East.
River Place has their own system.
Yeah, they have their own system. That's correct. Everything pretty much west of 95 is either septic or its own system.
Yeah. All right. Can I get a motion on this item?
I move that we defer this to the next meeting. A lot of commissioners, for the first time seeing it was Friday night when the agenda went out. And I just believe it needs a little bit more work. There are some commissioners that have water utility management in their communities. And there's a lot of, I deal with a lot of dissatisfied customers, like I work for the water company. So this is my first time seeing it since Friday. The first time I saw it was Friday. Haven't had a lot of time to digest it over the weekend, but there are some points I'd like to address. If we're doing a 20-year agreement, exclusive franchise monopoly with water utility management.
We already got it.
Well, I know we already have it, but if this is the time to renegotiate and try to work out a better deal for some of their existing customers before they start expanding, I believe now, before we sign this, is the time to do it.
You have it at Elliott's Plantation.
Elliott's Plantation, correct, yes, sir. And, I mean, I don't get a lot of calls in my district. A lot of it's incorporated St. Mary's, but the two communities that aren't incorporated, out of the two, 99% of the calls I get from Elliott's Plantation, and half of those have to do with the water company.
Well, I know that Robbie's actually been working on this quite a bit.
And I know this is really to the benefit of trying to expand to the north end, and I greatly understand the importance of that. I do just want to try to look out for the interest of the people in my community as well.
May I ask what the concerns or maybe additions need to be?
Yeah, of course.
Because in order to get it before you, if y'all defer this to the next meeting, I'll need to get back with water utility management.
It is very specific, yes, sir. So, and I know I haven't spoken to this with you about this, but I know I've spoken to the chairman. Before water utility management made the announcement that they were going to put generators at all of their well sites, before that, obviously that was the number one concern. When the wind blows a little too hard, they don't have water for 2 days, or whenever they get a technician out there. Their simple ask is a generator at that site. I know there was an email that went out November of last year where they said, over a 2-year period, they'd be rolling out generators to all of these locations. Since we've checked up on it, I think they're waiting for some reimbursements from FEMA. So I don't know how that's going, but we're a year into when they first made that commitment. And I'm just wondering, is Elliott's Plantation the last on the list? When are they going to start seeing some activity out there to actually get a generator at that location? So I'd like to see in this contract that all new and I know that there is verbiage that most of their new locations are going to have generators. Elliott's Plantation is an older location. So I'd just like to see language in here that ensures that there's going to be generators.
The only thing that I would be cautioned on that, and I mean, if you all so choose to incorporate that in there, as a
Well, and it's only
majority.
a first motion. I mean, I haven't had a second.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is because I think it's gonna be very hard to, try to, basically enforce or make them have generators, when even some of our own municipalities don't have generators on every single one of their pumps. So I'm not saying that it's not a end-all be-all. I mean, I think if y'all want to have that in there, then
Well, and the caveat there too is that the municipalities have local staff to address those issues in a timely and quick fashion. You know, that the closest technician for water utility and management, I believe, is out of Brunswick, and I'm sure they have a lot of communities along the way before they get to Little Old Elliott's plantation. So it's something that's been asked for since before I even took office, and I just see this as an opportunity to try to make that happen for them. So that's why I'd like to see this deferred, and that was my motion, was to defer it so we can work that out.
We got a motion to defer. Do we have a second? All right, that dies for lack of a second. Can we have another motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the franchise agreement.
All right, we got a motion to approve it.
Second.
We got, and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? All right. All right, that passes 4-1. This brings us to calendar, Katie.
Or no change.
County Administrator comments.
I just have a couple, Chairman. So last week, our Deputy County Administrator, our previous Deputy County Administrator now, Seth Collins, he is now the acting or the city manager for Santa Fe, Texas. So I was hoping he would be able to be here this evening, but he's actually already in Texas working with Santa Fe now. So we did a nice kind of farewell to him last Thursday, and a lot of county staff, even some of the commissioners came, and thank you all for that, being able to do that and sending him and his family on their way. I think they're going to do a wonderful job back over at Santa Fe, and they're very familiar to the area. I believe his wife used to be a city councilwoman there as well, so quite a bit of ties to there. Her family is there, so I think it's going to be a great benefit for them. So wishing Seth and his family all of the best in their future endeavors. For those of you that did not know, we did have an election today and an early voting election last week, so I have the final numbers. Early voting, we had received 123 people, and election staff has processed 24 absentee ballots. Today, we received 69 voters. So, in person, 69 voters in person today. So, they're actually working downstairs right now, getting ready to receive all of the final counts. The good thing was we only had to open one precinct for the actual election day versus all 14. That was because there was a less than 1% turnout for the Democratic primary portion. So kind of a caveat of the law that I had never known about. So I think we were one of, I don't know how many counties were able to do that, but it definitely cut our cost. So they're downstairs processing that now, and I'm sure we'll have final results here pretty soon if you choose to stick around. That's all I have, Chairman. Thank you.
All right. All right, this brings us to our last public comment of the night. We're limited to 3 minutes. Anybody registered? Anybody from the public wish to speak?
Good evening. My name is Janie Everett, and I live in Woodbine. I'd like to thank you all for recognizing Thiokol when you did. And I'm really proud of the support that you all have given us. In the past, when Governor Deal administration was in, there was a declaration made to remember and honor the Thiokol workers and the first responders on February the 3rd. Since then, we have asked the state to designate February the 3rd as Patriots and Heroes of Thiokol Day, to name the day. And so that effort is going to go forward, and we're hoping for your support. There are certain days on the Georgia calendar that are named for specific people. And so we wanted to go back and ask the state to name that day in honor of everyone involved in the THACOL workers and all the first responders that tried to save their lives, specifically Patriots of THACOL, the Patriots and Heroes. So we ask for your support as we go back once again to ask for this day. Now, the day was declared a day of remembrance. I believe it was in 2016, but we have failed in our other attempt to get this day named for these two class people. Now, the 30 people are distinguished citizens, but we have not gotten that day named not in remembrance, but actually named for the people involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak before the board? All right, hearing none, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank y'all.